Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Council meeting of the 26th of August 24. We will commence by reading the Acknowledgement of Country. Councillor Gillies, would you like to read the acknowledgement?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people as the traditional owners and original custodians of this land and pay my respects to their elders past and present and the elders from any other communities who may be here today.
Thank you. Welcome to tonight's Council meeting. Before we commence, I request that all mobile phones are turned off or switched to silent. Thank you. The Council meeting is being live streamed on the Council YouTube page, so you can watch proceedings of the meeting, councillor deliberations and voting. The meeting will also be recorded and made available on the Council website as soon as practicable after the meeting. My name is Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth and I am the Mayor of Boroondara City Council. I will start by introducing my fellow councillors. Seated to my left at the horseshoe table in this council chamber is Councillor Jim Park, Councillor Felicity Sinfield, our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Nick Stavrou, Councillor Wes Galt, Councillor Di Gillies, and on the opposite side of the horseshoe table, Councillor Cynthia Watson, Councillor Gary Thompson and Councillor Jane Addis. I also acknowledge in attendance this evening is our Chief Executive Officer, Mr Philip Storer, on my right, and Manager of Governance and Legal, Brian Wee, on my left. There are other officers in attendance tonight and they will be introduced as required. Mr Wee, are there any apologies this evening?
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councillor Franco and Councillor Bigger are apologies this evening.
Thank you. Adoption and confirmation of minutes for two meetings, those being the 22nd of July and the 19th of August 24. Councillors, can I please have a motion to adopt and confirm the minutes? Councillor Galt.
So moved, Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Gillies?
Seconded. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone opposed? I see no opposition. I will put that to the vote. Those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officer. Is there a councillor that wishes to declare a conflict this evening? Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Item 7.13, I have a material conflict given the nature of who the beneficiary of that discussion is.
Thank you. And I see no other lights on, so we will move on to the next item. Deputation and presentations, petitions and public submissions. Mr Wee, are there any deputations?
Through you, Madam Mayor, this evening we have one deputation with two presenters, Mr Ray Peck and Mr David Strang.
Thank you. Mr Strang and Mr Peck, can you please come to the end of the horseshoe table to make your deputation? You have 3 minutes each to present. There will be 30 seconds, when you get to the 30-second mark of your presentation, I'll ring the bell just to give you an indication that your time is fast approaching. And Mr Peck, I believe you're going to begin, is that correct? Right. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the opportunity to make this deputation regarding the Kew Recreation Centre. And thank you for the work you've all done for Boroondara residents over the term of your time on council. My name is Ray Peck. I've lived in Boroondara for 22 years. I also have other family members in Boroondara, including a son and grandchildren. I have a background in science and maths and take an interest in climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. So I was pleased when the council declared a climate emergency in 2021 and subsequently developed climate action and implementation plans. Thank you. One goal of the Climate Action Plan is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from council-run buildings and services, and I'm aware that significant reductions in corporate emissions have been made through the power purchase agreement of 100% renewable energy. This is good news. The Council's climate plans set targets of carbon neutrality by 2022 and a 90% reduction in emissions by 2030. Corporate Action 1.3, quote, progressively transition council buildings off natural gas. In alignment with the Climate Action Plan and its emissions goals, it appears to me that the Kew Recreational Centre should be heated and cooled by electric heat pumps powered by 100% renewable energy rather than by gas. Heat pumps are 3 to 5 times more efficient than gas boilers, and using heat pumps in new aquatic centres instead of gas is the trend around the nation, as I'm sure you know. By electrifying the Cardinia pool, for example, the Geelong City Council was able to reduce emissions from the pool by 90%. The Clean Energy Regulator's website suggests that saving emissions at the Kew Recreational Centre, because it's a new project, may likely be eligible to earn Australian carbon credit units, which could then be sold by council. The Australian Alliance for Energy Efficiency, A2EP, has considerable experience, resources and personnel with expertise in the electrification of aquatic centres and would be able to advise on this matter. A2EP members, Mr Brendan Voss and Mr Alan Pearce, have been most responsive in answering my questions. I commend them to you. Before proceeding with gas heating at the Kew Recreation Centre, I asked Council to at least obtain a second opinion from aquatic centre energy experts at the Australian Alliance for Energy Efficiency on how to minimise corporate greenhouse gas emissions from the Kew Recreation Centre and to make that report publicly available. In this way, the community can have confidence that Boroondara Council is enacting its climate plan while providing state-of-the-art facilities and services to its residents. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Mr Peck. Right on time. And can I just ask, I assume you're a Boroondara resident?
Yes, I'm a Boroondara resident. I've been a resident for 22 years.
And can I just ask what suburb?
Hawthorn.
Hawthorn, thank you very much. Councillors, are there any questions for Mr Peck? And I would just also say that if the questions could please be concise and relevant to the presentation. I see no lights on. So we will now move on to Mr Strang. Would you like to proceed? Thank you. Oh, and sorry, could you also just state what suburb you're from?
I'm from Hawthorn East.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Good evening. My name is David Strang. I'm a long-time resident and ratepayer of Boroondara and a Lighter Footprints Committee member. I'm also an accountant with experience as CFO of businesses with capex greater than $100 million per annum. I share the pain resulting from the unfortunate events of October 2022 at the Kew Recreation Centre site, and I understand the types of issues facing the council. I believe it would be prudent for the council to reassess the fuel to be used at the centre, given the extensive delays, and in the interest of transparency, for the council to provide ratepayers with their findings and decisions, together with reasons for those decisions. I recommend the limited review based on my considerable experience. My recommendation would be different if this was an in-flight project where scope changes should be avoided. However, this project has experienced such a delay that it cannot be considered an in-flight project, and the external environment has changed so much since the project was approved. My reasons for the recommendation are as follows. Firstly, the significant delay to the project should result in the development of new plans to complete the project. In these circumstances, this discrete review will not cause delays. Secondly, the economics of recreation centres have changed since the original approval, and it is likely that a revised financial analysis will conclude that the council and ratepayers will be better off if heat pump technology is used. The following items are likely to impact the revised financial analysis. A, hot water heat pumps have become cheaper and more efficient. B, gas prices have risen and are projected to continue rising. C, the council may have to cover increasing abatement costs if it continues with gas. D, there is likely to be a need for the financial analysis to take into account a limited life for gas-fueled heating, given Victoria's moves off gas. And E, the value of carbon credit units should be taken into account if these are available. And thirdly, external factors have changed. We're in a situation where the Victorian government is providing incentives for councils to transition recreation centres away from gas. I think we should be walking together in this area and not walking in the opposite direction. So for the reasons outlined, I request that the Council commissions an independent experts report into the fuel to be used at the Kew Recreation Centre and makes the experts report, together with its proposed actions, available to ratepayers. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you both for your presentation. Is there any questions? I see no lights on, but look, thank you very much, and you may return to the gallery. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Wee, are there any petitions this evening?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are two petitions this evening. The first is a petition in relation to the fuel at the for the Kew Recreation Centre pool, and I understand the second petition is one that Councillor Stavrou intends to table.
Thank you, Mr. Wee. Mr. Stavrou, would you like, or Councillor Stavrou, would you like to speak to the petition?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Mr. Wee noted, I intend to table this petition regarding the new Kew Library redevelopment, and I would start by saying that it reflects a broad support based around the Kew community, and including residents, schools and aged care facilities, all of whom are united in the desire to see this project move forward. To that end, they've conducted a petition where 4 key actions are sought, and I'll begin to briefly describe them. Won't go into much detail. One of the actions that are needed, required by the signatories, is the immediate action to start the project. And the community understands what that means, that the library is fully funded at this stage and the budget is in sound condition to accommodate this project. And the community also understood throughout the debate that 14 years in waiting, it's been a long time, and this project should really begin as quickly as possible. The other action requested of us is that appropriate funding allocation. And what this really means is that the original structure was never intended to serve as a library, and its form really doesn't suit the needs of a library of the future. The new library should be a state-of-the-art, environmentally sustainable facility and reflecting its unique location next to the wonderful Alexandra Gardens, and really become a community hub. The other action our community requests of us is to honour our commitments, and this petition urges the Council to honour the commitments made on the 25th of March Council meeting, but also the community in particularly is concerned that the Kew Library will eventually transition to the Glenferrie ward, and they hope that future candidates will confirm their continued support for this essential project when asked by the community. Last but not least, they also ask us to embrace the opportunity, an opportunity that recognises that significant funds will be needed to repair the current library regardless, and therefore the petition encourages the Council to embrace this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to enhance the lives of all Kew residents. This project has the true potential to be transformative for our community, not only in Kew, but in Boroondara. So in short, the community has presented us with very common sense actions, and it's our responsibility to heed their voices and act accordingly. Furthermore, this project transitions. It's crucial that future candidates, when asked, confirm their support continuing.
Thank you, Councillor Stavrou. And I just wanted to mention to councillor colleagues and member in the gallery, in accordance with Governance Rules Clause 57.3.2, page 39, it is acceptable for a councillor and typically a ward councillor to submit a petition on behalf of the submitters. And so thank you for articulating the content and intent of that petition. Now, councillors, I'm in search of a motion to receive and note the petitions. Do I have a mover? Councillor Thompson.
Happy to move and receive.
Thank you. And seconder, Councillor Gillies.
So seconded, thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. And just to note, the petitions have been referred to the relevant directors for consideration.
Any opposition?
And before we go to the vote, is there any opposition to the motion? I see no opposition. Those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, we now move on to we move on to item 4, informal meetings of councillors. Now, on the screen behind me, we are in search of a councillor to move a motion in relation to the informal meetings as circulated in our business pack. Do I have a mover? Councillor Sinfield.
Happy to move that.
Thank you. And seconder, Councillor Stavrou?
Happy to second, Madam Mayor.
All right, thank you. I will now put the motion. Those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Public question time. Council encourages the submission of public questions prior to 12 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Questions submitted prior to 12 noon will be provided with a detailed verbal response as well as a written response. Those submitted after 12 p.m. will receive a verbal response if possible, but will otherwise be taken on notice for a more comprehensive written response in due course. Mr. Wee, do we have any public questions?
Through you, Madam Mayor, this evening we have 10 public questions submitted by 6 members of our community.
Thank you. Now, to help table the questions as efficiently as possible, I will read out the questions and then go to the relevant director to provide the response. All questions received will receive a written response in due course, even though they are presented this evening. So we will begin now. The first question is from Ethan Gilbert. Ethan, are you in the gallery this evening? Cannot see you there. The subject matter is former Vic Road site. The question is, would you support the rezoning of the tail to the general residential zone Schedule 4, in brackets GRZ4, if the government committed to providing such needed social housing on the land, or at least use the rezoning of that land to incentivise social housing provision within the broader site? I will go to the Director of Urban Living, Mr. Scott Walker, to respond. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Effective planning and design of this large site can deliver multiple positive outcomes. The Victorian Government can ensure there is a diversity of housing types delivered on the site, including much needed social and public housing, as well as providing open space and important pedestrian and cycle connections. Council has made a submission that opposes the rezoning of the tail to general residential zone and instead has submitted to the government that a public park and recreation zone is more appropriate to enable a pedestrian and cycle connection and open space.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gilbert, for the question. The next question is from Lynn Thomas. The subject is seasonal sport allocation policy. Lynn, are you in the audience in the gallery? Cannot see you here. The question is, I live in a small narrow cul-de-sac in a very close proximity to Stradbroke Parks and ovals. Increasing training times and introduction to night matches is not acceptable to us. Will Council give an assurance that the current training hours will not be extended and night matches will not be scheduled in the area's close proximity to residential areas? I call upon the Director of Community Services, Ms. Kate McCackey, to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Sporting grounds are busy and active places which can create a level of noise by community members who use these spaces. And while we acknowledge that at times there may be inconvenience for residents living in close proximity to sports grounds, Council believes that participating in sport and recreation creates important physical, social and mental health which benefits the broader Boroondara community. At this stage, it is anticipated that the draft organised sports seasonal allocation policy will be presented to Council's Services Delegated Committee on Monday the 9th of September, and interested parties are welcome to attend. It's of note that the draft policy includes a number of provisions regarding protecting residential amenity, including provision 4.5.2 regarding an annual review of the suitability of night match locations, and provision 4.5.4, which is about responsible behaviour, and that for all seasonal tenants who must abide by their seasonal licence agreement, and if not, then any willful or repeated breaches may, at the discretion of council, result in the use of a facility being withdrawn or restrictions placed on the seasonal tenant use. So in this way, we've got a number of provisions in the draft policy which protect residential amenity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms McCarthy. And there's a second question from Lynn Tamas as well, with regard to the same subject matter, and the question is, Council says it takes into account residential amenity impacts when allocating sports grounds, but it isn't able to limit the number of people attending training and matches. This is a contradiction. Additional hours of use will result in additional noise, nuisance, and add to existing pressures for car parking when our family and friends visit. How will Council prevent further loss of amenity to adjoining residential areas as a result of additional scheduling at sports ground? And I'll hand over to Ms McCarthy again. Thank you.
Thank you. As noted previously, sporting grounds are busy and active places, and there is a high demand for access to these spaces across Victoria as well as in Boroondara. And so high levels of participation correlate to better levels of physical, mental and social health, and Council makes every effort to balance these local residential amenity impacts with access to sport and recreational opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms Tamas, for the questions. Next question is from Geraldine Hooper, and the subject is advertising material at sporting clubs. Geraldine, are you in the gallery? I will proceed with the question. Good evening. What are Council's current advertising and promotional requirements as they apply to sporting clubs' licence agreements when using electronic scoreboards, including if sporting clubs are permitted to advertise and promote only club sponsorships on the electronic scoreboards during and throughout training sessions and sporting events that are not competitive and thus have no scores, either day and or at night? Again, I will go to the Director of Community Service, Ms Kate McCarthy, to provide response.
Thank you. Sporting clubs are permitted to use their electronic scoreboard to display sponsors throughout matches and allocated training times. Clubs will generally use electronic scoreboards to display sponsors on match days. However, if it is a junior game where scores are not being recorded, clubs can still operate their electronic scoreboard. Clubs are not permitted, however, to advertise sponsorship for or to make reference to any external parties where their primary operation or product involves tobacco, gambling, sex industry, or portrays a negative emphasis on gender, race, sexual preference, religious belief, marital status, or physical or mental disability.
Thank you, Ms McCarthy. We also have a second question from Geraldine Hooper, and the question is seasonal sport allocation. Again, will Council engage in open consultation and or public meetings with residents in close proximity of the Boroondara sports grounds, in brackets, particularly where there is a level of sport ground lighting that is currently below the standard of 100 lux required for night games, close bracket, to understand residents' concerns regarding the potential significant impacts of increased hours of use until 9:30 p.m, 10:30 p.m. Monday to Friday for training, until 10 p.m. on Saturdays for night matches and 9 p.m. on Sundays for night matches, as detailed in the organised sports seasonal allocation policy. Again, I will go to Ms McCarthy to respond.
Thank you, Mayor. The committee was invited to provide feedback on the draft organised sports seasonal allocation policy via the engagement platform Your Say Boroondara between the 27th of February and the 19th of March 2024. At this stage, it is anticipated the draft policy will be presented to Council on the 9th of September, as I indicated earlier, and people are welcome to come and present at that meeting, because that will be a services delegated meeting. Just as I iterated before, the draft policy has a number of provisions in it which support and address in an ongoing way the ability to look at residential amenity. And one of those is provision 4.5.4, which includes an annual review of the suitability of night match locations. And this is informed by factors such as site infrastructure, lighting quality, ground condition, ground carrying capacity, and importantly, resident impacts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Kaki, and thank you, Ms Hopper. Next question is from Ian Hundley. Ian, are you in the gallery this evening? Good evening, how are you? The subject is monetary penalties under the Tree Protection Local Act. Question: please advise the number of parties who receive financial penalties for contravening the tree protection local law in each of the years 2019 to 20 to 2023 to 24, and separately for each of these years, the number of parties who receive the maximum financial penalty, then in order of 1,900 as indexed annually. We'll refer this question to Director of Urban Living, Mr Scott Walker. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. The number of infringements issued for contravention of the tree protection local law in each of the financial year for the previous 5 years is 12, 75, 91, 84 and 97 respectively. Infringements issued are to the fixed penalty amount, which is the $2,000 maximum allowed under the local law that applied at that time. There is one instance of a reduced penalty relating to a dead tree.
Thank you, Mr Walker. The second question from Mr Hundley is also on the subject matter pre-protection local law. The question is, having regard for the increasing numbers of non-English speaking households in the City of Boroondara, will Council take early steps to enhance understanding of the provisions of the recently revised tree protection local law by letterboxing residential properties with flyers written in the appropriate languages and by rostering staff with the necessary foreign language skills to respond speedily to resident queries for information on the provisions of the local law? Again, I will go to the Director of Urban Living, Mr Walker, please.
Thank you again. There is no data to indicate any meaningful growth in the number of Boroondara residents with limited English, with the percentage being the same at the 2016 and the 2021 census. Communication, however, in regard to the tree protection local law following adoption of the local law this year has included placing information on Council's website and a mail out to property owners that contain or are adjacent to significant trees. The website is available in multiple languages and the urban planning team can arrange translation services for phone inquiries as required.
Thank you, Mr Walker. The next question is from Carol Hunt and the subject matter is Macleay and Myrtle Park sporting allocation. Ms Hunt, are you in the gallery this evening? No, I will proceed with the question. Will Council guarantee that under the proposed master plan for Macleay and Myrtle Parks that residential amenities will be protected by not extending any sporting activity beyond 9 p.m. on any day of the week? I will refer this question to Director of Community Services, Ms Kate McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I note that the Macleay Myrtle master plan is still under development, but in terms of some of the timing and timeframes for the seasonal allocation, I'll just say that further to my previous comments, the usage of sporting facilities is seasonal sporting facilities is proposed to be managed in accordance with the draft organised sports seasonal allocation policy to be presented to Council for adoption at the 9th of September Services Delegated Committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms Hunt, for your question. The next question is from Lee Norton. Subject is grant allocation. Question is, can Council outline the reasons for its failure to allocate any grant monies from the funding pool for the climate action grants, which consist of $30,000 from Council's 2024 to 25 $1 million climate action plan allocation? I will call upon Director of Community Services, Ms Kate McCarthy, to respond. Thank you.
Thank you again. No decision has yet been made about the climate action grants. Thank you.
Thank you. The second question from Mr Lee Norton, subject also grant allocation. Question, will Council explain how it justifies keeping the grant allocations to the funding pool for the climate action grants confidential and allocating the unused funds to unspecified alternate climate action plan actions rather than seeking further applications from community organisations to support them to act on climate emergency that Council has declared. I will refer this question again to Ms Kate McCaughey. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any unsuccessful grant application, be they an annual grant application, a small grants or climate action grant application, remain confidential. Any funding for climate action grants remaining after Council has made a decision on grant allocations will be utilised in the delivery of Council's Climate Action Plan implementation planned to 2023 to 2025, and this is available on Council's website.
Thank you, Ms McCaughey. Mr Norton, I forgot to ask if you're in the gallery. Are you here this evening? Good evening, how are you? And thank you for your questions. I will just conclude by saying, as mentioned earlier, all questions will receive a written response. And again, thank you to all members for submitting their questions. Now, notice of motion. Mr Wee, do we have any notices of motion?
Through you, Madam Mayor, no notices of motion this evening.
Thank you. We will proceed to the presentation of officer reports. Thank you. Now, councillors, because we have a very long agenda this evening with some very complex issues and volumes of documents to support them, in the interest of time and efficiency, does any councillor have any order with the issue of the agenda or wish to flag any agenda items for discussions or questions with the officers? If Councillor Thompson?
I see you've got a motion up on the screen to move en bloc. Can I ask, because I have a conflict on 7.13, that's excluded from en bloc?
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. We will exclude it from en bloc. And I will now read out, and councillors, if you can look on the screen behind me, that there is an opportunity to move en bloc. 7.7, contract maintenance and installation of electronic access and CCTV systems. 7.9, revised instrument of delegation. 7.10, biannual report of the Audit and Risk Committee. 7.11, community services triennial grant funding deed extension. 7.14, Frog Hollow Reserve Pavilion redevelopment. 7.15, contract of general drainage and repairs. And 7.16, recommendations of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting on the 11th of June 24. Councillors, I am in search of a motion, if there is an appetite to move the items en bloc as I've just read out. Councillor Gold.
Happy to so move, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gold. And seconder, Councillor Simple.
Happy to second.
Thank you. I will now seek, first of all, is there anyone in opposition to that? I will put the motion. Those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. To the members of community and members in the gallery here this evening, I just wanted to assure you that Council has been provided with and carefully reviewed each of these items on report. Council is progressing these reports in a way because they have agreed with the content of the report and the officer's recommendation. Excuse me. We will proceed with item 7.1, the June 24 quarterly financial report, and I will call upon Ms. Sapphire Allen, Chief Financial Officer. And if you can please proceed with your introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to present the June 2024 quarterly financial report, which includes detailed financial reporting of the full year result for the 23-24 financial year. Please note that these are interim year-end results while the accounts are still being finalised, and we expect some changes after completion of the year-end audit by the Victorian Auditor General's Office, Fargo. Overall, Council has a sound financial position with a surplus result of $38.59 million compared to the 23-24 amended budget surplus of $5.05 million. Please note that Council does not make a profit. The surplus result includes a range of carryover funds allocated to various projects and activities, as well as several non-cash items as well, accounting entries. Some positive items to note, we have had a $12.99 million net gain on the disposal of property, infrastructure, plant and equipment. Primarily, this is due to proceeds and disposals for the sale of Serpils Lane and the divestment of the Burundara Tennis Centre by the state government. There's been an increase in interest on investments of $3.43 million due to current market conditions, and an increase in open space contributions by $2.90 million. This is offset by materials and services coming in higher than budget by $2.45 million, primarily due to specialist tree works. Further variance explanations are provided in attachment 1 of the report in your agenda papers. With priority projects, there has been a delay with some projects and works have not been delivered. Primarily, this is due to the Transforming Burundara program and the exit with the vendor we had for the project expenditure. The expenditure for this will be carried forward to the 24-25 financial year. For capital works, Council has delivered to target against the 23-24 amended budget. The overall financial position at 30 June 2024 is satisfactory with a working capital of 2.89. Thank you, and happy to hand over to you, Mayor.
Right, thank you, Ms Allen. So I can see some lights on for questions. Councillor Stavrou.
No question, Madam Mayor, just foreshadowing a motion when the right time comes.
Thank you. And Councillor Thompson?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Through you to officers. It's just been enunciated with the net gain for the disposal of Serpils Lane, and the officers made mention also of the divestment of the Burundara Tennis Centre. Is that just a note for commenting? Have we actually received any funds from the state with regards to that amount?
Thank you, and thank you for your question. In regards to the Burundara Tennis Centre, yes, we have received some compensation in the amount of $30 million.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Now, before we put this motion to the vote, Councillor Stavrou, I see your light on, but before we put the motion to the vote, with your indulgence, I would just like to read a few comments, as this is the quarterly end of financial year report, but it is also this last report that will be coming before this council in this council term. So I'd like to share some of the projects and initiatives and policies that have been implemented recently and over the last 4 years. First of all, I would start with the report is designed to obviously acknowledge the annual budget for the 2023-24 period, reflecting the Burundara Community Plan 21 to 31. This report reflects the full year of net operating surplus of $38.9 million, which is $33.54 million favourable against the 2023-24 amended budget surplus of $5.5 million. We are focused on delivering services, projects and initiatives that meet the needs of our community as expressed in the Burundara Community Plan 21-31. As councillors, it is our role as decision makers to keep the long-term interests of our community at the forefront. This marks the final year of the current council term, and I would also like to use the opportunity to share of some of the projects made towards the long-term strategic objectives. It is important that we continue to invest in high-quality, sustainable and inclusive community services and facilities. A key highlight from our term was the opening of the new Canterbury Community Precinct in 2023. This major redevelopment has created a central hub to access maternal and child health and early years services, as well as community programs. This precinct is supported by the redevelopment of other community centres, including the Balwyn Community Centre and the Canterbury Neighbourhood and Learning Centre. A number of early learning facility upgrades were also carried out, including the Through Road Early Learning, the Rowan Street Kindergarten and the JJ McMahon Memorial Kinder. To support the growth demand in sport, we have invested in sports grounds facilities to make them more accessible and inclusive, while also maintaining the quality of our open space. Several sports grounds pavilion renewal were undertaken in the past year, including the Linden Park Pavilion and Sports Ground, the new open space at Glenferrie Oval, and Victoria Road Reserve Sports Facility. In March 2023, we also celebrated the reopening of the Freeway Golf Course following a significant redevelopment. A highlight from our term was the enhancement of the recreational opportunities for children and families in the redevelopment of regional playgrounds, including the recently officially opened Hayes Paddock, the Victoria Gardens Playground and the Central Park Playground, affectionately known to our community as Rocket Park. The importance of these facilities is very clear in the overwhelming response on social media. By example, the opening of Hayes Paddock alone reached over 170,000 unique viewers. Our commitment to improve Burundara's environmental sustainability is evident in the range of initiatives aimed at reducing our environmental footprint. Our climate action plan was adopted in 2021 following significant consultation with our community. It was followed by the adoption of the Burundara Bicycle Strategy in 2022 and the adoption of the Master Plan draft for Gardeners Creek in October 2022. Since 2020, our FOGO bin collection has supported our community in diverting 72% of waste away from landfill each year. And in support of neighbourhood character and heritage, the Burundara Housing Strategy was adopted by Council on the 18th September in 2023. This strategy ensures we can moderate development density to suit the existing aesthetics and character of Burundara as a top priority of our community. We continue to support residents, businesses and community groups through the implementation of a $4.5 million COVID-19 financial assistance package, and it does seem some time back since we all endured the impacts of COVID at its peak, but it's actually something that we have endured this council term. Also in this term, we've had the delivery of comprehensive parklet and outdoor dining programs from late 2020, which was extended due to the overwhelming popularity of our community. A number of place plan initiatives have helped improve the quality of our streetscapes, contributing to the local economy. And in the past year, we have done upgrades to Camberwell Fresh Food Market, the Mailing Precinct Laneway and Surrey Hills Shopping Centre. Now, I'm near the end of this, so if you bear with me, to support the delivery of all of these services, we focused on making improvements to the customer experience achieved through our Transforming Burundara program. One of the highlights included the digitalisation of our hard waste processes, which was recognised with a Customer Experience Award by the Municipality Association of Victoria. We are continually enhancing how our community interacts with Council, including a number of digital improvements, including the digital newsletter and the fortnightly feed. And I am pleased that this year Burundara was again rated by our community as one of the top performing councils in Victoria in the annual Local Government Community Satisfaction Survey, which is an independent survey commissioned by the state government. As we are coming to the end of this council term, I am glad to reflect on what we have been able to achieve in collaboration with council officers and our community to build towards our shared visions of a sustainable and inclusive community. We have recently engaged with over 5,000 community members who have had their say and told us what's important to them as stage one of the consultation for the 2025 to 35 Burundara Community Plan, the plan that will refresh and continue to guide the future strategies and plans that are delivered to our community based on the voice of our community. I would like to take this opportunity to thank my councillor colleagues for their work and dedication over the last 4 years, and thank you to everyone within the Burundara community for your support in making Burundara the wonderful place to live, work and visit for now and well into the future. Thank you. So, as we resume to business, councillors, I am in seek of a motion to move the June quarterly report. Councillor Stafford, you foreshadowed a motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation written on the screen.
Thank you. And Councillor Sinfield?
I'm happy to second that.
All right. Thank you. Now, is there anyone opposed? I see no opposition. Councillor Stavrou, as the mover of the motion, would you like to speak to the motion?
Madam Mayor, just briefly, you've eloquently expressed where the monies have been spent and the good work the council is doing. Just only want to thank the officers for the hard work that goes into this, preparing this report, and also the explanation given by Ms Allen that we actually don't make a profit and the surplus are because of time differences and lags of various projects. Without further ado, I just commend the motion to my colleagues.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Sinfield, as it's not opposed, did you wish to speak? No, thank you. I will now put that motion. Those in favour? Thank you. I declare that carried unanimously. The second item is, and thank you, Ms Allen. Second item, 7.2, H.A. Smith Reserve and Patterson Reserve. This item will be introduced by Michael Hutchinson, the Head of Strategic Properties and Rates. Good evening, Mr Hutchinson, joined by Scott Walker. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Councillors, before you is a report to consider the commencement of the legal process for Council to lodge a claim for title to a parcel of land within Council's H.A. Smith Reserve in Hawthorn. The land is 38 square metres, and attachment 7.2.3 of your papers shows the location of the parcel overlaid on an aerial plan. In summary, the land is in the name of 4 individuals dating back to 1900. Attempts to locate the registered proprietors or identify any beneficiaries to the land has been unsuccessful. The land has formed part of the open space within Council's H.A. Smith Reserve for a considerable period of time. If Council's claim is successful, Land Use Victoria will grant title to the land in Council's name, which will ultimately be incorporated into the consolidated title for the reserve. Should Council resolve to commence the legal process, an application will be lodged with Land Use Victoria. Land Use Victoria will require Council to place a notice of its application on the land. The notice will state that Council has applied for title to the land free of encumbrances and that the Register of Titles may grant the application within 30 days from the date the notice was placed on the land if it is satisfied that the Council has acquired title by possession. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Galt.
No questions, Mayor, but when it comes to the appropriate time, I'm happy to move the motion.
All right, thank you. And Councillor, Stavrou, you'll turn your light off. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks. Through officers, kindly included a plan which shows this unusual parcel of land. Immediately to the south of it, is that the boundary of where Gardeners Creek once roamed? That no longer roams that direction?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Yes, there's been a lot of changes in that location over time when the freeway came through, but that apparently was the Creek Reserve at some point.
So at the time that this was considered, that was a very unusual block if the creek was right next door to...
Yes, it would appear that way.
No further questions.
Thank you. So no other lights on. Councillor Galt.
I'm putting this motion forward in absence of the ward councillor who's away tonight. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, and I'm in search of a seconder. Councillor Stavrou?
Happy to second that, Madam Mayor.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone opposed? See no opposition. Councillor Galt, would you like to speak to the motion? Thank you.
Very briefly, Mayor. This is pretty much a procedural operation. As the officers have pointed out, no beneficiaries have been traced, and it's part of a process of cleaning up these titles, and we applaud that. So I encourage my colleagues tonight to support this motion.
Thank you. And as there is no opposition, I will put the motion. Those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, Mr Hutchinson. We will move on to the next one, which is also with you to present. 7.3, adjoining 976 to 988 Burke Road, and the motion is on the screen behind me. Over to you, Mr Hutchinson.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Councillors, before you is a report to consider a proposal for Council to take title to the land remaining unsold from a previously discontinued road adjoining 976 to 988 Burke Road, 6 to 14 Will Street and 2 Eyre Street in Borwin. The discontinued road is shown hatched in attachment 7.3.1 of your papers. Council discontinued the 3.05 metre wide road in February 2016. The majority of the land from the discontinued road was sold at that time. Recently, Council canvassed the possible sale of the 3 remaining unsold lots in accordance with Council's current policy. None of the adjoining property owners expressed an interest in acquiring any part of that land. At this time, property owners were informed of Council's intention to take title to any unsold land consistent with the current policy. Further, property owners have been informed that as a result of this action, they would be precluded from pursuing an application at Land Use Victoria for title to the land via adverse possession. However, none of the abutting property owners expressed an interest in acquiring any of the land. It is considered that abutting owners have been provided with ample opportunity to decide whether or not to acquire the land, or alternatively pursue an application to Land Use Victoria for title via adverse possession. Consistent with this policy, Council can now proceed to uphold its intention to take title to the unsold land. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks. Through you, back to officers. If the landowners seek not to take adverse possession and we take title, a number of properties are actually using this land. Are we seeking to fence it or to... What's our intentions?
Through you, Chair. The land being occupied, the occupation can remain. The intention would be that if the present owners of the land do not wish to purchase the land, a future owner of the property may wish to do so and consolidate that into their land.
So they're benefiting regardless of adverse possession?
If you don't mind waiting one moment.
My understanding is that the land is fenced within, it's occupied, so being that there's the fence between the 2 property boundaries as it would be if the land wasn't there.
I find there's a funny policy that we're seeking to take this back, considering they've got full right to use it, even though they don't want to acquire it.
Councillor Thompson, the Director is just going to confirm and address or provide clarification to your question.
This would be interesting. I'm smarter than I look.
I don't always believe that.
Through you, Chair. So the status quo will remain on the site. So where the fence is now, the fence will remain, and the current owners have an opportunity to take up formal ownership of the land that they occupy. If they choose not to, that's okay. The fence will remain as it is. The situation will stay the same, and in the future, another owner of the property or future owner of the property may wish to take up ownership of the land. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I think Councillor Thompson is asking whether or not the owners who are not interested in taking up possession of the site, in fact have use of the site, and raising question as to whether or not it's appropriate that they continue to have use of the site without paying anything for the land.
And to that extent, through you, Madam Mayor, to the CEO, to understand, I guess, precisely why we're doing this exercise, given what the CEO has just enunciated.
It's to ensure that we clear up title to the land so that in the future, should they wish to actually acquire it, they need to purchase from council at that point in time. So at some point in history, council may well get the return on the land to which it would then be entitled.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. That satisfies your question, Councillor Thompson? Thank you. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question through you to officers is, have the affected property owners been invited to attend tonight's meeting, and have they been consulted?
Through you, Chair. The property owners have not been invited to tonight's meeting. So tonight's meeting is to commence the statutory procedures. During that, they will be invited to participate in the consultation process, and certainly will have an opportunity, if they so wish to, present to council at the Services Delegated Committee if they do make a submission. Through the process, our consultants and people that we engage certainly consult with all the adjacent owners, all the affected owners. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Park.
Thank you. Flowing on from the questions asked by Councillor Thompson, I've got two questions. The first is, what is this exercise costing? And the second one is, what's in it for council?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The cost to council for us to take title, we've estimated that to be just under $1,500. The exercise, or what we're seeking to achieve here, is an opportunity for the land sale surplus, which is $114,000. Thank you.
So just in case my question about cost wasn't clear, when I say this exercise, I mean the consultation, any consultants, any valuers, the whole process is $1,500.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The discontinuance process has already been completed, so that those costs have already been paid for in the past. This is an additional cost for us to take title to the land, so all that work's already been paid for in the past when the road was discontinued.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor Stavrou.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you. If the owners don't wish to take up the land, are there any sale implications in future transactions, or do these rights carry over with, in some way, as an overlay?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. If a person's occupying the land, they sell the property, those years they've occupied the land, we would certainly recognise that.
Does that address your question, Councillor Stavrou?
Well, maybe. So what does that mean in the recognition? Does that mean that the new owner will own the full parcel of property, or own the parcel that originally belonged to the original owners.
Thank you, through you, Chair. They'll only own the property that is on their certificate of title. So if you're occupying this land but you don't purchase it from us, you don't have title to it.
And one more follow-up then. Then let's say the new owner went through the process, basically if they communicated with us, would we need to go through this process again, or having gone through this process, the new owner can just transact with us and then take ownership should they wish to do so in the future?
Through you, Chair, that's correct. That's what we're seeking through this process. Thank you.
Mr. Storer.
I was just going to comment, Madam Chair, that if an owner acquires the title to this land, they would then have the opportunity to consolidate that title with the remainder of their title, so it then forms one title, and a lot of people actually do that. If the land is not subject to title being conferred upon the abutting owner, then, and it remains in its current form, there is no ownership to be transferred. And Council, of course, if it did not lodge adverse possession proceedings where they are what might be involved in some cases, but they were commenced by another owner, Titles Office will tend to treat with the other owner before they would treat with the Council seeking to acquire title in that way. So there's a couple of different means by which the land can be transferred and ultimately dealt with.
Thank you. Councillor Park? Oh, sorry, Councillor Stavrou, does that exhaust your question? Yes, thank you. Councillor Park?
What's our usual approach with the primary property in each instance? Do we make a notation on the searches that alerts them to the potential to approach council, because that would be useful, presumably?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. That's certainly an opportunity that we're currently exploring, is having a notation on our land information certificates, so that when a new purchaser picks up the property, they've, whilst they might discover it through their own due diligence in looking at the contract for the sale of the land, they might notice that there's a small block at the back there that's not on their title. We would certainly assist them in potentially buying land from us, but we also are looking at a land information certificate notation that would signal to the owner that that's the situation that's there and that they can talk to us about acquiring the land from us. Thanks.
What's the likely time frame on a resolution of that question?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. We're currently working on putting that through. I'm happy to say it could be enacted over the next 8 weeks.
Thank you, Councillor Park. I see no further lights on. I am in search of a councillor to move motion. So anyone prepared to move the motion? Councillor Park.
So moved.
Thank you. And second, Councillor Addis?
Happy to second.
Right, thank you. Is there anyone opposed? I see no opposition. I will now put that motion. Oh, sorry, before I put the motion, Councillor Park, would you like to speak to?
No, I'm not in election mode, so I'm happy for the motion to be put.
Thank you. I will now put the motion. Those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously, and thank you, councillors, for your curly questions. Councillor Sinfield is the seconder. Did you want to speak, or?
No, I wasn't the seconder. Councillor Addis was.
Sorry, Councillor Addis. I've just realised your light has gone on. Yeah.
Yes, my light is on to alert you to a conflict of interest that I have in relation to the upcoming agenda item 7.4.
Thank you. So now that we are up to 7.4, would you now like to take your leave? Thank you.
I will, thank you. So it's incumbent upon me, out of an abundance of caution, to disclose a perceived general conflict of interest in relation to item 7.4. I'll now leave the chamber.
Thank you. Councillor Sinfield. We will now move to 7.4, rear 18 to 22 Wills Street. I believe this is street, even though I've got steer, but, and 996 to 1000 Burke Road, Balwyn. Proposed sale of land from discontinued road. Mr. Hutchinson, it's all yours again. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Councillors, before you is a report to consider commencement of the statutory procedures to sell the 3.05 metre wide section of land at the rear of 18 to 22 Wills Street and 996 to 1000 Burke Road, Balwyn. The location is shown in attachment 7.3 of your papers. In March 2020, Council discontinued the 3.05 metre wide section of road at this location. Only one parcel was sold at the time. Council has since received further expressions of interest from abutting owners to purchase the land. In summary, the land is in the name of the original subdivider, is considered by officers to be of little practical value to Council. The land has been enclosed within adjoining properties for an excess of 15 years, and Council will take title to the remaining unsold land from the discontinued road. The owners of 22 Wills Street, 996 and 1000 Burke Road, Balwyn have made conditional offers in accordance with Council's policy to purchase their allocated sections from the land, shown respectively as lots 1, 5 and 2 in attachment 7.4.2. The owners have also agreed to meet Council's costs associated with undertaking the sale of the land, which is in accordance with Council's policy. Should Council resolve to commence the statutory procedures, a public notice will be placed on Council's webpage and notification in writing will be made directly to all abutting property owners, informing them of the opportunity to provide feedback. If any submissions are received, a further report will be presented to a future meeting of the Services Delegated Committee to enable the consideration of any submissions and for a decision on whether or not to sell the land. If no submissions are received, officers will undertake the necessary procedural steps to complete the formal process for the sale of the land and to take title to any land remaining unsold. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watson.
No questions, just prepared to move the motion at the appropriate time.
Right, thank you. I see no other lights on, so would you now like to move the motion?
I would, Madam Mayor, as printed.
Thank you. And seconder, Councillor Park?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Is there anyone opposed? See no opposition. Councillor Watson, as the mover of the motion, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just briefly to thank the officers for the work that they've done, and I will spare my colleagues from any speech and ask that the motion be put.
Thank you very much. I will now put the motion. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll now just bring Councillor Sinfield back in for the next agenda item. One more to go. Good point, yes. Yeah, I think you're right. Welcome back. We will now move on to 7.5, rear of 8 Kooyong Coot Road, Hawthorn, proposed sale of council land, and this will also be introduced by Michael Hutchison. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Councillors, before you is a report to consider commencement of the statutory procedures to sell a parcel of council-owned land with an area of 24.2 square metres at the rear of 8 Kooyong Coot Road in Hawthorn. The land is shown cross-hatched in attachment 7.5.2. In summary, the land is in the name of council, is considered by officers to be of little value to council, and has been enclosed within the rear of 8 Kooyonkoot Road, Hawthorn, for in excess of 15 years. The owner of 8 Kooyonkoot Road has made a conditional offer to purchase the land for market value plus costs, which is consistent with the policy. The adjoining property owner has been consulted on the proposal and no objection has been received. Should Council resolve to commence the statutory procedures, a public notice will be placed on Council's webpage and notification in writing will be made directly to all abutting property owners, informing them of the opportunity to provide feedback. If any submissions are received, a further report will be presented to a future meeting of the Services Delegated Committee to enable the consideration of any submissions and for a decision on whether or not to sell the land. If no submissions are received, Council officers will undertake the necessary procedural steps to complete the formal process for the sale of the land. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Addis.
Thanks very much, Mayor. I notice on the plan that there's a section that's hiatus land. Now, I'm assuming that makes no difference, but I just wanted to be sure that that doesn't impact on what would seem to be a fairly standard process.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Correct, Councillor, there is a hiatus, a small hiatus, which is shown on attachment 7.5.2. Council cannot deal with the hiatus itself. However, the occupier of the land, which is 6 Kooyonkoot Road, that we're seeking to sell this land for, 8 Kooyonkoot Road. When 8 Kooyonkoot Road completes the purchase from us and lodges their paperwork with Land Use Victoria, they can also incorporate that hiatus land that they've been occupying. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gold.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. That was my first question. The second question is really just a clarification. The bits of land behind 7 and 9 Berkeley, are they already sold on to those properties, or what's the status of those?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The land behind number 6 Kooyonkoot Road, that's recently been sold and settled. That's the area where the orange arrow is pointing to. The land behind 7 and 9 Berkeley, that's land to be retained by Council. Thank you.
Right, okay. Through you, Mayor, I'm happy to move a motion when the time's right. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other lights on, so I believe now's that time. Thank you.
Again, on behalf of the Ward Councillor, I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. And I'm in search of a seconder. Councillor Addis?
Happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Grold is the mover of the motion. Oh, sorry, I should ask first, is there anyone opposed? I see no opposition. Councillor Gold, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks very much. Thanks to the officers for preparing the report. Clearly, this land has no great value to council, but has a monetary value, which is good. This is the start of a process. Clearly, others can object to the sale, so we're really just starting a statutory process, and objection, if there are any, can come back later. So I see no reason why we shouldn't proceed with this now and strongly support it. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now put the motion. Those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Hutchinson, you can leave. Thank you. The next item, 7.6, Balwyn and Balwyn North Heritage Study Peer Review. We will call upon Ms. Rachel Bryan. Good evening, how are you? And please proceed with the introduction when you're ready.
Thank you, Council and Madam Mayor. Good evening. Tonight's report is to seek Council's adoption of Amendment C398 to the Boroondara Planning Scheme following the Urban Planning Delegated Committee decision at its meeting on 5th of August 2024. The amendment seeks to implement the recommendations of the Balwyn and Balwyn North Heritage Peer Review Stage 3 prepared by GML Heritage and the 25 Burrows Road Balwyn Heritage Citation prepared by Built Heritage by including 18 individually significant properties in the heritage overlay on a permanent basis. Following the planning panel, the panel did not recommend the heritage overlay be applied to 1 Caravan Street, Balwyn. Upon review by officers and Council's heritage expert, this property has been recommended for removal from the heritage overlay. On 5th of August 2024, the UPDC resolved to endorse the response to the panel's recommendation and refer the amendment to this meeting. Officers recommend Council adopt Amendment C398 as endorsed at the UPDC meeting and resolve to submit the amendment to the Minister for Planning for final approval.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Watson.
No questions, Madam Mayor. Happy to move the motion at the appropriate time.
Thank you. And I'm in search of a seconder. Councillor Park, thank you. Is there anyone opposed? I see no opposition. Councillor Watson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to make the distinction that this particular property is coming through the council-led study process, quite different to the discussion that we've had on heritage nominations in weeks past. This process I support, and I'm very happy to support the officer's recommendation on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will now, first of all, seek if there is anyone opposed, which I believe we've gone through that. There's no opposition. I will now put the motion. Those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. And thank you, Ms Bryan. I neglected to say you're a strategic planner and very instrumental in working on this project. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Walker. Now, the next item is the 2024-25 Annual Community Strengthening Grants and Climate Action Grant Allocations. This will be introduced by Ms Kate McCackey, Director of Community Development. Good evening, how are you? And Fiona Brown, Manager of Community Development, will do the introduction. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. So the purpose of tonight's report is to present the recommended grant allocations for the 24-25 Annual Community Strengthening Grants and the 24-25 Climate Action Grants to councillors for endorsement. Endorsement is also sought on offering a mini grant round to expend the remaining funds from the 24-25 annual grants. The funding pool for the annual grants is $543,185. The small grants were endorsed at a council meeting in June with $83,791 allocated, and this left $459,000 available for the annual grants. 76 applications were received, totalling $476,500, with 2 applications transferred from the small grant category. 2 applications were deemed ineligible because they didn't meet criteria. 4 applications were withdrawn and 7 were not recommended for funding. Officers have recommended a total allocation of $333,857.13 to support 65 of the 72 applications. The funding pool for the climate action grants is up to $30,000 and is an allocation from the 24-25 budget for the climate action plan. 3 applications were received, totalling $14,567.22. No applications were recommended for funding. The mini grant round. Officers are proposing that the remaining funds of $125,536 from the annual grants be used to offer a mini grant round to eligible organisations for a grant up to $1,800 to purchase a defibrillator. Applications will be assessed by council officers and approved by the Director of Community Support under Community Services under delegated authority. Any remaining funds after allocating the mini grants will be rolled over to the 25-26 annual community strengthening grants. So the recommendation before you and up on the screen is to 1, endorse the 24-25 annual community strengthening grants as listed in attachment 1 to this report. Secondly, to endorse a mini grant round up to $1,800 from the remaining funds of $125,536.52 to be approved by the Director of Community Services under delegated authority. And 3, to roll over the remaining funds after allocating the mini grants to the 25-26 annual community strengthening grants. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Brown. Are there any questions? Councillor Addis.
Don't have any questions, but just, Madam Mayor, wishing to foreshadow the possibility of an alternative motion.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. Councillor Sinfield.
No question, just falling in line.
Thank you. Councillor Addis, as you foreshadowed an alternate motion, would you like to speak to that now?
I'll just seek. Yeah.
Thank you.
So that is the alternative motion that I am seeking to move.
Right, thank you. And councillors, when you've had time to read the alternative motion, is there anyone that's prepared to second this motion? Councillor Sinfield?
I am.
Thank you very much. Now, is there any opposition to this motion? I see no lights on. Councillor Addis, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you very much, Mayor. I am aware that some of the other councillors are on the committee and may want to say a few words, so I will keep this brief. But firstly, to thank the officers. It's a great deal of work that goes into preparing this process for us, and equally to thank the committee members who devoted time to consider all the different grants. So I'm very pleased to support the group of grants that have been recommended because they do a great deal for the community. Small amounts of money can make an enormous difference to community activities. The reason why I've added point 4 is that I'm aware that a number of us feel that we probably lack some information that we would like to have in assisting us to consider the items in attachment 4. Now, I won't say any more about that because I'm cognizant of the fact that they are confidential, and I think that speaks for itself, and I'm hopeful that officers will be able to get that information back to us quite soon so that we can move forward in a way that we feel is appropriate. Yes, this council term we're hoping. I understand that might be possible. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Addis. Now, Councillor Sinfield, as the seconder, would you like to speak now, or as Councillor Addis alluded, is there any other councillor that wanted to speak?
With your indulgence, I would like to add a couple of words.
Okay, please, thank you.
And I thank Councillor Addis for her comments. I was very satisfied with the officer recommendation that was on the screen earlier, but I do understand that there are several councillors who seek to have clause 4 added to the motion that is on the screen. And I respect that. I'm happy for a further report to come forward, but I do find it disappointing that the conclusion and the recommendation of the panel, of which I was the chair, that has not been entirely respected. We do have a process in place. It has worked very well for council for a number of years, but to satisfy my colleagues, I'm happy for this further report to come forward, and I apologise to the officers for any further work that causes them. I would just like to close by thanking my councillor colleagues who did join me on the panel, and particularly our community representatives from Rotary. Without them, we would not be in this position financially to be able to deliver these grants, and the officers who have done a vast amount of work every year in triaging these and bringing recommendations to us. So thank you very much, Ms Brown, to you and your team.
Thank you, Councillor Sinfield. I believe there is no opposition, so I will now put the motion. Those in favour? Those opposed or against? I declare that carried. Thank you. And thank you, Ms Brown. Ms McCaughey. We now move on to item 7.12, Burundara submission to Plan for Victoria and draft housing targets. And this item will be introduced by Jess Donaldson-Lloyd, Coordinator of Strategic Planning.
Through yourself, Mayor, if seek your indulgence, we have had a bit of a change in circumstances due to a couple of perhaps further opportunities that have come our way or announcements by the Victorian Government. So I will introduce this item and put a bit of context to some of those changes, and then hand over to Mr Cowan to introduce specifically the Plan for Victoria submission and our submission on the draft housing targets. And I make that reference to some wider changes because there were announcements late last week in regard to the Camberwell Activity Centre. And I think it's important to highlight the context of the Camberwell Activity Centre and a future report that will be coming to the Urban Planning Development Committee next Monday evening in regard to that specific activity centre situation. There has been a draft activity centre plan announced by the Victorian State Government, and that really focuses in on housing plans for that particular location. The draft activity centre plan put out by the State Government late last week features 2 areas proposed to accommodate taller buildings and larger developments. It's an activity centre zone around the specific activity centre area and a new catchment area, which is an 800-metre expansion from the proposed activity centre boundary. And that activity centre zone proposed is the same as that reflected in council. The activity centre zone itself is that reflected in the Camberwell structure and place plan, which was developed based on extensive research and consultation with the community. And this component we're very supportive of. What is of significant concern is this additional catchment area that extends the further 800 metres from the boundary of the centre and will allow for development of heights of up to 6 stories in heritage areas and low-scale single-dwelling leafy neighbourhoods. And neither council or the community have been consulted on this alarming new catchment area, which is, in our view, illogical and a poor planning outcome. And we talk about that because this is an example of the types of changes that appear to be coming our way to deliver on the housing statement and the housing targets that have been put forward to us. So that's the context here for this broader submission that we'll be explaining to you on the housing targets and for Plan for Victoria. This vast catchment area around the Camberwell growth area around that activity centre includes more than 4,500 heritage listed properties. And it's estimated that 48% of this catchment area is in fact protected by a heritage overlay. This catchment is not supported in any way and shows total disregard for local heritage and amenity in our view. And this catchment area has been imposed with no evidence of any strategic analysis, assessment of local infrastructure capacity, or consideration of the impact on local services and community facilities. And again, you'll hear these themes in regard to our commentary about the housing targets and the broader housing plan for Victoria. There's been no consultation with Council on the latest version of the plans, which includes this catchment area, and Council only obtained a copy of the latest plans via the State Government's website on Thursday of last week, after media releases and announcements were made by the Minister. Council has advocated for its adoption of the Campbell Structure and Place Plan, which we've sought authorisation from the State Government to enable transition into the Burundara planning scheme. And in this regard, Council has acted as a model planning authority and successfully worked with the community and stakeholders to plan for future housing, economic development, public realm investment and transport infrastructure while protecting character and amenity of Camberwell in that situation that the community love. And that's through a thorough examination and planning process, which again is a hallmark of what we feel should underpin planning approaches right throughout the municipality. I'll hand over now to David Cowan, our Manager of City Futures, to talk a little bit more now about our views and position on Plan for Victoria and the housing targets.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Mr Walker. So tonight's report seeks council endorsement of the submission to to the Victorian Government for Plan for Victoria and the draft housing targets. In June 2024, the Victorian Government released the draft housing targets for all councils in Victoria. The target for the City of Burundara is to provide 67,000 additional homes by 2051, which represents a 90% increase on the current housing stock in the city. The draft housing targets are to be finalised in December 2024 through the release of the Plan for Victoria. The Victorian Government has called for submissions by the 30th of August on these targets and 8 big ideas for the plan. Officers have prepared a submission to Plan for Victoria raising the following significant concerns. Important policy initiatives such as these require genuine engagement with local communities and councils and should not be fast-tracked through media announcements. The draft housing targets are poorly defined and lack a clear evidence base. There has been inadequate consideration of the impacts on local heritage, tree canopy, infrastructure capacity, and the provision of open space and community facilities. The short period of consultation and poorly defined targets make it difficult for councils to measure the impacts of these targets. However, as an example, to maintain current open space provision per resident would cost an estimated $12 billion if it was even physically possible. Traffic congestion would rise substantially and require massive investment in both public and active transport. The Victorian Government has made no funding commitments to the future infrastructure, transport and open space needs of this future population. Local governments are not the cause of the housing crisis, but councils are ready and willing to insist with the planning of provision of housing. But this requires genuine partnership with other levels of government, not blame deflection. Subject to council support, officers will submit the adopted submission in attachment 1 to the Minister for Planning. Thank you and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr Cowan. Councillor Watson.
Thank you for your submission and speaking on many different points that we've discussed over the years in the Camberwell committee regarding this particular structure plan. My question's pretty simple because I'm seeking some clarification about the motion. When you, in item 2, you say you're going to do a letter mail out to all residents. I'm presuming you don't mean across the whole city of Burundara. Are you perhaps talking about the zone, the new zone around the activity centre? Like, what does that mean?
Through yourself, Mayor, and perhaps there's a little bit of confusion in my background referencing Camberwell. We'll have a further UPDC meeting and report specifically on Camberwell next Monday evening. The intention here in regard to the plan for Victoria and the housing targets, in our view, has an implication across the entire municipality. And the intention under point 2 here would be all residents within the municipality.
All right, thank you. I guess it's a discussion for a future time, but I'll leave my comments there. I don't know whether I entirely agree with you, but I will talk at a future meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Stavrou.
Thank you, Mayor. Just on the comments made by the officers, it was one comment about the open space requirement, if it was possible. Can you please repeat the number? Because I didn't quite catch it. It's not rhetorical. I didn't really quite catch it.
Through you, Madam Mayor, it was up to 12 billion.
It's billion. Okay, I thought I heard it there, and it was incredulous. So my question, and you may not be able to answer that, is you raised a lot of interesting points about traffic and all the other amenity issues, but our council has been, not only this term, but terms before, involved in Climate Action Plan. Have you got any estimations, if that's the gap in terms of open space, what a kind of build-up would mean for our climate action plan in the municipality, and what kind of hit island effect it could produce, and how backwards we will go without that canopy?
Through you, Madam Mayor. As outlined, it is very, very challenging to make estimates given the short period of time and the large unclear target, so we can't, I guess, estimate the impact on the climate action plan at this stage.
I thought, is it possible that that kind of thing can be done in the future work? Because it sounds, to me, there's a scientific answer, and it means a lot, so.
Yeah, a broad answer of a lot would be fair. We are putting a lot of time into considering the implications of these targets for the city as a whole, and that work is ongoing.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Sinfield.
Through you to officers, I wonder if we may be able to publish the submission on our website to be available to the public and to the media.
Absolutely, yeah, no problem with that at all. We will certainly intend to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Gillies.
Thank you, Chair. Not a question, but happy to move a motion when the time is right.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Through you to officers, couple of questions. The first one, which I know is subject to a further UPDC, but since it was mentioned in the presentation, the Camberwell Junction, that's just been issued to us by the state government. Are officers aware whether the state government or the planning department from the state government, has had any conversations with any other council in relation to their sites that have also gazetted for growth?
Thanks through yourself, Mayor. There are 10 activity centres that are the first group of activity centres. It's our understanding that those 10 activity centres will have their planning controls brought into place at the same time in December. Again, my understanding through my colleagues at other affected councils is they were not informed or given any detail until the days leading up to the announcement, and we are all in the same boat in that regard.
So, pardon the phrase, but there's an equal disdain for all local government from the state government with regards to this?
To yourself, Mayor, that's correct. And I certainly am aware that there are some quite disappointed councils in that approach.
Second question, which relates to that, what's been tabled by the state government in terms of the Camberwell Junction? Will that meet the housing targets that you outlined for the city of Boroondara?
through you, Madam Mayor. We are currently in the process of analysing those housing targets and how they could be met and the implications of them if they were met. In regard to the Camberwell catchment area, I guess the release on Thursday hasn't enabled us sufficient time to consider the implications in terms of housing supply.
So just to that end, so it's plausible that Camberwell Junction might be target number one. There might be another couple of targets like Glenferrie Road and other urban activity centres that are...
Again, through yourself, Mayor, and perhaps I mentioned earlier that the 10 activity centres is the first group of activity centres across metropolitan Melbourne. Our understanding is that the Department of Planning is intending to roll out similar plans for all major activity centres across Melbourne and ultimately have a growth area around each of those activity centres. And there's a figure quoted of something in the order of 121 activity centres right across metropolitan Melbourne that will have similar sorts of controls applied to them.
So two further very short questions. Will this mean that council needs to review other ancillary services like how we approach schools, childcare centres, sporting clubs, ovals, recreation spaces?
Yes.
And the amenity impact on those adjoining residents?
Yes.
Last question, and it could be taken as a little bit of a statement. Item 2, there are members of our community that are supportive of moderate and appropriate density because of housing affordability. I'd ask that officers tailor any response that doesn't exclude the needs of our community in its fullest.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gold.
Thanks very much. I mean, clearly this letter and what we've had to date focuses on Camberwell because it's one of the 10. I agree with Councillor Thompson that what will follow will probably be Glenferrie Road, probably Kew Junction, etc., etc. But we've got a housing strategy that deals with a lot more than those and has delineated areas throughout Boroondara that we could accept higher density. Have we shared with the state government areas where we think we could intensify density without just concentrating on those areas, which unfortunately, if the very frustratingly simplistic rule of 800 metres is used, will affect an awful lot of heritage areas.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Indeed, we are looking at, as I mentioned before, we're doing quite a lot of analysis on what areas are appropriate. The housing statement does outline how we propose to provide housing for the municipality in a range of strategies. Obviously, the new housing targets have required us to rethink some of our existing strategies and policies. And I guess during this submission phase, we have an opportunity to provide our views. There's only so much we can do within these short periods of time in terms of consultation, but we'll be certainly working on an alternative view for how housing can be provided in Boroondara.
Thank you. Councillor Addis.
Thanks very much, Mayor. I think I'm seeking clarification, and I think you might have sort of answered this, but is it reasonable to suggest that Councillor Gillies' Junction ward is, in a sense, being sacrificed to meet? Oh, you probably wouldn't use those words. Is it being used to meet our targets? I mean, it seems to me that the potential for development in this area would be, in this small area, would be more than all of the municipality would have been intending to absorb.
Again, through yourself, Mayor, that could be a conclusion that's reached. But what we haven't got is the evidence that sits behind the analysis and the work. So the drawing of an 800-metre boundary around the activity centre in Camberwell has been done in a generic way because it's an 800-metre boundary around each of those 10 activity centres. So there's no analysis to say what is the capacity in that 800-metre ring. And I use the example of the heritage area because the heritage area effectively means there can be very little housing, in our view, very little housing delivered in that ring where the heritage area is affected. So at one level, if a housing assumption is made that there will be delivery of X or Y number of houses to meet the housing targets, but that's not real because it's impacted by other factors, then it's going to have to be catered for elsewhere. So yes, at one level, it's an automatic reaction to say, yes, that's the sacrifice, but in practice and in reality, it's actually not well thought through and good planning. It's not proper planning to actually arrive at where the growth should go. And that's what our housing strategy has done. It is said, here's where the growth can go. Now, if you can build from that and then understand, well, how can we adjust that and add to that to meet housing expectations and guide housing to the right locations, we actually will get to the right answer in terms of future housing delivery for a municipality like Burundara. And we can get there through that proper planning process, not in a generic way, and in a way that says, let's apply a target that means nothing.
Thank you, that's helpful. And just one further question, which in a sense piggybacks on Councillor Watson's query about the letter mail out to all residents. Is the notion for that we're effectively saying, beware, this could happen to you too? Because I think what you're, and I mean, I can see the logic in it going to all our residents if more politely, but that's the tone we're taking. Is that the thought?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, the intention here is to inform our community about what's being proposed. We are going to be very careful about not seeking to be critical of the state government in that process of communication, but to make clear what it is the state is proposing to do, and to encourage people, if they have concerns, to raise them both with the state government and also with council.
Thank you, Mr. Storer. Councillor Galt.
A further question. Mr. Walker, I'm very warmed by your comments about heritage areas, but can I ask, have we any reason to believe that those heritage areas will stand, or will they simply be sacrificed to this new guideline?
Through yourself, Mayor, we don't know, because what we haven't got in the Camberwell Activity Centre plan is an explanation and understanding of the weighting and what will take priority, and whether future housing up to 6 stories in this growth area will actually lead to decisions that override heritage. Now, we're assuming not. However, that is not explained and outlined and detailed in the plan. So we don't actually know. And why I say this is not good planning, because without knowing and without seeing the detail, potentially that detail will lead to those outcomes. And potentially it will lead to VCAT having to actually weigh up those 2 planning priorities that would be within the planning scheme. So the simple answer is we don't know, and it's not appropriate to put forward a plan in this way without explaining how that will be played out.
Thank you. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, and apologies. I'm wondering whether officers might be able to speak to the decision-making framework around the approvals within this catchment area and the 800-metre growth zone, and as to whether council is likely to be the responsible authority moving forward.
Again, through yourself, Mayor, and we'll talk a little bit further about this next Monday night when we have the report up at the UPDC meeting. In the version of the plan that we received on Thursday, there was no explanation of the decision-making process within that plan for planning applications within that 800-metre growth area. And that, again, is concerning because would the planning authority be the council or would it be the Department of Planning or Minister? And that wasn't revealed or outlined in the plan. What we have subsequently seen in further sections of the Engage website that has been set up by the state government is a further line that says standard notification and planning decision processes will apply in that growth area. But that's only subsequent to the plan being released. It wasn't included in the plan, it's been subsequently included on the engagement website. So our assumption from that is that normal processes will apply in that 800-metre radius, but we still haven't got all the detail.
Thank you, Mr Walker. Councillor Thompson.
Sorry, one final one, just following on from that previous question. Obviously, what's intended, you would assume, applies to rezoning of those land parcels to accommodate that growth. Do officers give any comfort to us as councillors or to the community with regards to those 4,500 properties under a heritage overlay as to whether the state has in the past or is likely to in the future override heritage overlays that they've actually endorsed themselves?
Again, through yourself, and we might explore some of these topics a bit further again next Monday evening, there is no detail around any zoning changes within that 800-metre radius. So we don't have, there's been no express intention to change zones or to change overlays that exist now, such as heritage overlays. So that hasn't been included within the plan. What has been indicated is that there will be a change to the planning tools in some way that will layer over a change in heights and building outcomes that can be expected within that sort of precinct, that 800-metre radius.
Structurally, there needs to be a change to the Boroondara planning scheme for that to occur.
That's correct, but not necessarily a zone change or change to heritage overlays. It may be a further planning tool within the planning scheme that says you can do X, Y and Z type of development at certain heights within that 800-metre radius. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I believe questions are exhausted. Councillor Gillies, you've foreshadowed a motion.
Thank you, Chair. The motion as printed on the screen.
Thank you. And I'm in search of a seconder. Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, I'm happy to second.
All right. Thank you. And is there anyone opposed? I see no opposition. Councillor Gillies, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, whilst it's encouraging to see some positive feedback from the Planning Department regarding our Camberwell proposal, it's very disappointing to see the extent of this proposed catchment area probable. It's really, I'm becoming flawed the more I read and write about this with responding to this. So we're going to have a lot more to say over this in the next few weeks. Council has, no, let me start again. This catchment area is without respect for the heritage protections that are already in place, which they go a long way to conservation of the amenities that characterise Boroondara. Fast-tracking this expansion proposal gives us little confidence in the government's intentions to have a genuine community consultation, council engagement process at all. We'll have more to say about this at next Monday's meeting, but the purpose of this motion is to give our community some confidence that we are doing our very best to understand it, we are moving rapidly, and we want to keep the community informed. So my sincere thanks to Mr Walker and all his staff for the intensity and the commitment of the work they are putting into this. This is a very important piece of work as they fully understand the analysis of this proposal, which came at, well, no notice, just happened to be on the website. We didn't get advance notice of it, is something that needs to be responded to carefully, analytically, but swiftly. So I thank them for their work, and I thank them for the work in bringing this motion to us tonight so promptly. And I commend the motion to my colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Gillies. Councillor Thompson, as the seconder, I see your light is
Yeah,
on.
thank you. I'll just follow on from Councillor Gillies. I think this is a challenge because I know our community has a diversity of views with regards to protecting local amenity, housing affordability and density. I know there is a apparent diversity of views that's current and it's growing. I think the thing that should be well considered by all residents of Boroondara is the fact that these housing targets effectively mean a practically 90%, almost a doubling of the dwellings that we currently have. You only need to walk up your street, double those dwellings, and that's the housing target that we've got, and all of the things that come with it. So I fully support this because any level of government can't simply create a blanket policy without really deep diving into understanding the impact, where it's appropriate to actually do growth, where it's not appropriate to do growth, the consequential impact on all of the amenity and those sorts of things that the residents. So I'm not at all surprised that the state government hasn't consulted with any council because it's simply be unpalatable to do so, given all of those unknown quantities that actually affect the amenity of every citizen in every one of those municipalities. So this really needs to be carefully considered. I fully support the officer's stance on this one because any decision here going forward will affect generations to come. It has to be done appropriately, has to be done moderately, has to address the diversity of the community views, but not disadvantage them.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I won't speak on the motion other than I reserve my right to have comments next week when we have the report at urban planning, because I understand the magnitude of what's proposed. Thank you. I will now put the motion. Those in favour? Okay, that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Thompson, you declared a conflict?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, the next matter relates to Homes Victoria, to which I'm a panel architect, and therefore it's prudent for me to declare a material conflict of interest in this matter.
Thank you. We will wait for you to leave the room. Item 7.13, intention to enter into a new lease agreement with Homes Victoria for Hamer Court at 533 to 535 High Street in Kew, and this item will be introduced by Fiona Brown, Manager for Community Development. Welcome back.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, the purpose of this report is to seek council in authorisation for the Chief Executive Officer or their delegate to negotiate and execute a new lease agreement with Homes Victoria for Hamer Court at 533 to 535 High Street, Kew, for the purpose of providing community housing. Council has leased Hamer Court to Homes Vic for community housing since 2010. Homes Vic in turn sublets Hamer Court to Servants Community Housing to provide accommodation to 28 people experiencing or at risk of homelessness. The current commercial lease agreement is due to expire on the 30th of June 2025 and does not include an option to extend. Officers have had preliminary discussions with Homes Vic about entering into a new lease agreement once the current lease expires in June 2025. The commencing rent for Homes Vic under the current lease agreement was determined by a valuation undertaken by Council's valuer, which was compared with a valuation undertaken by the Valuer General Victoria. A similar process would be undertaken for the proposed new lease. So pending council endorsement, The CEO or their delegate will negotiate and execute a new 12-month lease agreement with HomesVic to commence on 1 July 2025. It is proposed that the new lease agreement will include an option for an additional 12-month lease. So the recommendation is on your screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Brown. Councillor Stavrou.
No question, Madam Mayor, just foreshadowing a motion when the right time comes.
Thank you. Now, I do not see any other lights on, so Councillor Stavrou, would you like to move your motion?
Certainly, Madam Mayor, the officer's recommendation in this case.
Thank you. And I'm in search of a seconder. Councillor Gillies?
So seconded, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone opposed? I see no opposition. Councillor Stavrou, would you like to speak to the motion?
Very briefly, Madam Mayor, look, Servants plays an important role in our community for housing of those that are in need and at the risk of homelessness, and we understand that. And as the officers have recommended, this is intending to help with the continuity of that. So I commend the motion to my colleagues.
Thank you. As it's unopposed, Councillor Gillies, you're happy to not speak as seconder. Thank you. I will now put that motion. Those in favour? Those against? Thank you. I declare that carried. Thank you. Yep. Welcome back, Councillor Thompson. We are now up to general business. Councillors, are there any items of general business? We have one item, 8.1, leaves of absence for Councillor Franco and Councillor Biggar. Councillor, I'm in search of a mover for the following motion as it appears on the screen behind me. I'll just give you a few seconds to read that one. Councillor Watson.
As printed, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And seconder, Councillor Thompson. Thank you. Is there any councillor opposed? I see no opposition. I will put that to the vote. And those in favour? I see that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Urgent business. Councillors, are there any matters of urgent business? Councillor Stavrou.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There is a matter of urgent business relating to the Kew Recreation Centre. It does need confidentiality, so I propose that I move a motion to go into confidential mode first.
Thank you. And I'm in search of a seconder. Councillor Sinfield.
Happy to second that.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone opposed? I see no opposition. I will put that to the vote. Those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, for the benefit of the people in the gallery and people watching this meeting, the proceedings will now cease while the confidential business is being discussed, and we will reopen the meeting to the public at conclusion of discussion. Thank you. Thank you. To the members of the gallery and people watching the proceedings of this meeting, the meeting now comes to a close as the order of business has been concluded. I thank all of you that have joined us in the gallery and online this evening, and I now declare the council meeting closed at 9:30 p.m. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your attendance. Thank you.